Um, okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another design review um, for Tabular. Okay, so today we're going to look at, as the title of the document says, database-backed Tabular, which we have not looked at for a while. So let's take a look at how this works. So this is an SQLite local database, correct?
Yes.
Um, and but if this was a remote database, how would that work?
I mean, the spec
Well,
for, instead of having find file, you'd have either an association that specified the address and username and password, or a magic string URL. It's all documented under database reference rather than this one.
Right. I mean, I don't think that other than in terms of, performance, that network access is slower than file access. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carlo, but right, it shouldn't affect how this behaves because it's still a database that's external to the kernel, even though it resides on this file system.
Well, as a matter of fact, until you have evaluated to memory, we don't really hit the database much at all. I mean, we hit it once to get the structure of the database when we evaluate relational database, and then we hit it again only when we do to memory. So all the operations are done sort of theoretically on the schema in your kernel.
Okay, I understand. So what's the way that we connect to this database? So in this case, relational database just immediately can get to this unpassworded SQLite database, correct?
Yeah. So we have database connect and database disconnect, but 95% of the times you don't need to worry about those because connections are basically treated automatically and
Okay, so hold on a second.
Well, let's look at
If this
database reference,
SQLite
actually.
database had a password, how would it work?
Well, the SQLite cannot have a password, but in the other cases,
Can we pull up database reference for a second?
Yep.
Because this ties into data connection object. Right now, if you look at the details, right, username and password are just in the ASOC. This will become, right, it's going to become authentication as an actual option and get the same behavior that we have in data connection object.
Which is to allow system credentials in the system key chain, is that correct?
Yep, and if you look at ref authentication, it's in DocuTools. There's kind of a new table with the behavior moving forward.
So I need
so database reference will be updated is the real takeaway here.
So wait a minute. So on that first line where you say relational database, is that going to now call? I'm a little confused about the plumbing. If I'm giving a URL from an external database and it is not yet authenticated, it will pop an authentication dialog or some such other thing. Is that correct?
It's not plugged in yet, but yes.
Okay. So what's the new piece of this?
I believe Sean sent the authentication page.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this is going to have, wow, that was me saying that in 2018.
Yep.
I've been working on it diligently since. That's a joke.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, you will make this basically something like this statement active soon.
Yeah, if you look at ref authentication, there's a new table there, and all of the behavior in terms of saving your credentials in your keychain and whatnot would be, utilized through database reference, and you would pass database reference to relational database.
Okay.
So there's kind of a unified way of doing authentication between database reference and the stuff that I'm building for data connection object. And then we'll add that to other things in authentication like LLM function.
By the way, do you think
Great.
that we should add the authentication option also to relational database, since that most of the times the head
Yes,
database? Okay.
I think so. I mean, just for convenience, why not? I have a question here. If I'm using a password manager, for example, is that, I mean, system credential is a per machine mechanism. Is that correct?
Yep.
It sort of depends, but but basically yes.
But so, I mean, for most of my passwords, I'm using a password manager, for example. I'm not using the system keychain, right, which would be only on a per machine basis, whereas the password manager is global to all my machines.
I use my password
Well,
manager in the browser, and for an application, I save my username and password with the keychain when it prompts me to access my keychain, right? Like when the Wolfram notebook pops up, do you want to access your keychain? I give it my username and password.
and I mean, right, there at least on Macs, right, there's such a thing as the iCloud keychain, which I don't know exactly how that connects, whether you can access that from system credential, but
Well,
you
that's the
know.
thing we should know, and we should have a workflow that tells people how to do this. Because if they're using, I mean, I'm not sure, a third-party password manager, I assume that they don't have APIs that let one connect to something like system credential. I don't know though. Can we find that out? That's a question for the
Steven,
syscom team.
I mean, usually when you use your password manager, most of the time you have to copy paste, right?
Sometimes it autofills. I've
Okay.
never been able to figure out when it can autofill and when it can't.
I mean, for most of my programs, though, locally on my desktop, it's not autofilling from my password manager.
Yeah,
Usually
okay,
just
well,
in the
fine,
browser.
fine. But in this case, I mean, I'm just trying to avoid people burning usernames and passwords into code because I think that's really stupid,
That's
right?
kind of the point of authentication, first prompting you a dialogue so that you can give your own authentication
Yeah,
and then pass a notebook to somebody else and they've given their own credentials.
I
And it
understand.
gets
But
cached.
unfortunately, too
Yeah.
many people, when dealing with databases, just burn the frigging credentials into code. But I
Which
guess
is a
that's
choice. I mean, that's the ASOC syntax. If you wanted to burn your password into code, that was your choice.
okay. All right, fine.
And also remember that so far we only have write. Sorry, we only have read, so it's not you can't do much
I
damage.
understand.
Yeah.
I understand. That helps. Okay. All right. Let's look at this now. So now this syntax, there's no other tabular syntax. I mean, in the case of, for example, list plot, where we're using that syntax to reference an element, a column, I understand that. This is a different use of that kind of syntax, correct?
With strong emphasis on kind. It's really like in the other case, the arrow is outside of the tabular, but yeah, in some sense, it's like a lazy part, right?
Is there a full form for this that's different from this, or is this the only way
Yeah,
to access?
there's an association, um,
Okay.
which is basically the association, but I mean, we don't plan to document it. The association is basically has a key relational database that goes to schema and a key query that goes to offices.
I think we should document that. I think it will make this clearer.
Okay.
There. Um, okay. All right.
And
So that,
obviously, if schema only has one table, you can drop the arrow and just use naked schema.
I understand.
And that tabular is not interpretable as why?
Because it didn't pull it into memory. It's a remote tabular.
I suppose, right, but it still, I mean, the thing that is in memory is
The
right,
metadata.
right. So, it's not obvious to me why that's not interpretable.
What do you mean by interpretable? I don't understand what you
You
mean by.
can't copy that output and use it as input.
Why
The
not,
set
man? Why not?
the way it's colored says you can't.
Oh, oh, you mean okay? Well, I guess
Which aspect of
is
the
in
color?
here.
The fact that the head is gray tells me that that summary box cannot be used as input.
So that's you are an aficionado, obviously, because you invented that, thing. And I only sort of viscerally noticed there was something funny about that. But yes, that should be black, presumably.
Well, one of the JSONs should help me make it black.
Is one of the JSONs here?
This is the JSONs are here.
Okay, good. It's super confusing. Like our chemistry team also has two JSONs in it.
So I can tell you that the thing Jason Abernathy is Jay. His nickname is Jay. My nickname is Jace. So you can go Jay.
Oh,
and
okay,
Jace.
that's useful.
Yep.
All right. I just remember those baby books called Beyond Jennifer and Jason. That was after your time.
Yeah.
I use proper Jason and other Jason.
Well, I hope that I'm the proper Jason because I was the former Jason. I've been around the longest. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
It's actually pretty funny that I have a collision in the company with another Italian, in Sound and Vision, but it's not that common of a first name.
Huh.
I would have, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, action item. We'll talk with Carlo. Make sure the thing is not great. Yep.
Okay.
Done.
All right. Now, do we want to say something in the summary box that says like remote or something before we go to back end? I mean, normally in a tabular, if I just make a tabular,
You need an extra list.
that error message could be a little bit better. I mean, yes, what it says is true, but we could make it a little bit more kind of specialized to the case I've given. Okay, how do I get a tabular that is
two tabular comma columns, two tabular of that comma columns. If you want one column of 10 rows.
No.
I
He
want
wants one that
box.
format. Right. Well, you could disable dynamic updating.
That seems incredibly scary. Wow. Now, what's that font doing? That font looks completely wrong. Look at that. That's a text font.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's something. This is either the style sheet inheritance bug or there's something wrong in the style sheet. We can investigate this.
Okay. All right. Okay. Looks kind of nice, but it's wrong.
By the way, these icons are currently being redesigned by Tim. But I guess we could have something that, I mean, we had some design from Jeremy for the entity store thing that had a kind of a nice cylindric thing to display a database.
Well, like that.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that too.
Why aren't we using that? Why aren't we then saying,
I guess that's just one leaf out of that book.
So we don't know how many rows there are. Is that a true statement?
We don't know how many rows there are. No.
Okay. All right. So then we should say here something. We should indicate that it is remote.
Well, I think the backend sort of.
Of course it does, but it does it in a backwards way. If you see what I'm saying. I mean, yes. If you know,
is it okay if we just say external backend? Is that change
it's a bit long?
Right, but
what is that going to say? Is that just going to say the brand of database?
Yep.
Who cares what the brand of database is as the initial thing if you're a user?
I'll put it below the fold then.
I think we should. I think what we should put at the top is just here, that first line should just say something like, I mean, it will be useful to know, is it truly remote or is it on your machine? Is it a file?
Mm-hmm.
That will be useful to know. So I think we should.
Yeah, go ahead.
So either we say that as a type or something, colon, whatever, or we just say that as a summary line. What would the summary lines be for the two cases we have right now, which is an on machine, a file backed database? I mean, we could just say file backed database or remote database.
And what would be the gray thing, the name of that
It just wouldn't have a name. It would just be that thing. Is that doable?
No, I mean it may be theoretically doable, but
All right.
it's
Okay. You
highly
don't want to do it.
non-standard.
Okay. So what do we want to call it then?
I also
Source.
think local databases are not super common.
Well, they will be
Yeah.
for us. Okay. So look, source colon file backed database. Source colon yes.
Do we want to say something like file back relational database? Or because what if we do out of core Parquet after this? That's not really relational, but it's still file backed.
All right. Okay. Then source file backed relational database. I think that's a very useful thing to tell people. Not the brand of database that it is, but that's really useful.
Okay. And what's the wording, like server backed? File backed and server backed?
Or network based, network backed.
Well, do we know whether it's local? I mean, if you had it locally served on your machine.
I mean, technically you could have the file one served on a network server.
Right. I was going to say that.
Server-backed relational database.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to mention that earlier. If you have NFS, your quote unquote local file may not be that local.
Yeah, though putting SQLite databases on NFS is kind of bad.
Yeah, that's kind of that's shooting yourself in the foot. But
Okay.
So while we're talking about boxes and there's one thing that I find slightly annoying, and I don't know if we plan to fix it or not, and it's the fact that if I have an in-memory tabular row, it doesn't have dynamic boxes. It doesn't show up as a table view, but it shows as the lazy version.
You mean the summary?
Yeah.
If you have an in-memory what?
Tabular row.
To be clear, I don't like that either. I prefer we did something other than the summary.
So why aren't we doing something other than the summary?
Cool. Okay, let's do something other than the summary.
Who made it the summary? Can somebody speak to this?
Well, Rob should speak to that, right? I mean, I don't remember
a summary. That's up to the typesetting people to do that. I would say it would be nice not to have a list number 1 in front to indicate it's row number 1 since it's a single row, but that's
so right. But for so why tabular column? Right, tabular column is always a summary. So why is tabular row not
way back when Stephen said that he thought tabular column should be a box as well.
Can we just look at an example, please? Can we look at an example? Where's the tabular example?
Take that tabular you just evaluated and do part 1. And then you'll get a tabular row.
Well, I just want to do, let me do something that's slightly more real here. Okay. I don't understand why it looks like that. So let's do a tabular column. Let's say %403 sub all comma 2. I'm totally mystified. Why am I getting? Okay. What do we think about both of these?
Okay, well, I know that tabular column is sort of a low-level data type, right? It's all homogeneous, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what a tabular row actually is.
Tabular row is exactly the same as tabular, but it just has 1 row.
All right, but this is just lazy that we just have this thing that looks like a 2-dimensional array here. That's definitely
again. I have a bug open on this. I'm talking to Tim about it. We have new designs for this. I just haven't put them in.
Okay, fine. But the question is, do we want to do something like this for both of these cases or not? Is that correct? And I don't see why we shouldn't preview things in these cases.
In some sense, I feel I feel like tabular row should preview and tabular column shouldn't. And there is a very deep anisotropy between the rows and columns, really.
Well, it depends on the fact that there are usually fewer columns in a thing than there are rows. But listen, I'm going to make a different argument. Right
Not
now,
just that,
tabular, hold on. First of all, we have to release this stuff. So we need to, tabular is a thing which does not have its head attached. It's these have their heads attached. I think for this version we should leave it like this, except we should fix this. Okay,
Yep.
if necessary, just remove that icon.
I mean, I have a new one that has only one row, and it kind of has like the left hand grayer thing, it becomes orange, so it's highlighted that's only one.
I'm not sure that convinces me, but we can look at it, or
Yeah,
we
right,
can.
but I don't understand why it says column count and then length. Why isn't that row count? Yeah.
Well, I think that's because the tabular column is right. It's a guarantee to be a homogeneous thing.
Tabular column is list-like.
Right. Tabular column
So
is
it
a
has
one-dimensional thing. So the concept of row is not clear.
I see. Okay. Well, I suggest for this version that we do not try and make previews here, that we simply make these somewhat consistent, remove that icon. I would just remove it. Boom, take it away. Make it like this. Make sense?
Okay.
Yes. Cool.
Also, this is not correct. This says element type in camel case. That's not how we normally do summary boxes, right?
It is not. That is
Why wasn't that caught somewhere along the line?
Because it's a very low level thing and you hardly ever interact with it directly.
Okay, fine, but it should be fixed. Okay, all right. Let's look at the out of core. Okay, so to memory of this. And does to memory have what kind of options and other things does to memory have? If I try and bring, oh boy, it's very vestigial.
Yeah, but I don't think it gets any options right now.
Okay.
But it's something.
If the database is a terabyte in size, what happens?
Blow up the memory. But you're right.
No. What actually happens? What actually happens?
That it will blow up your memory and it will not stop, basically. But
No. What happens? Does it try and allocate the memory at the beginning, or does it not know how much memory it's going to need until it's already moved over a lot of what's in the database?
Okay, so I think that there's going to be first an external process that crashes before it tries to allocate the memory in the kernel, because it's trying to construct the arrow table in an outside process.
Okay, so that's something for Sean or Piotr or whoever to say what that actually does. Right. So somebody says to memory of a.
I own that code.
Okay.
It's happening in Python. So I think it will just crash Python when it tries to allocate too much memory.
Well, I think a related question is what happens with to memory on a video, which
right. Well,
also implemented now.
Is it?
Well, yeah. That was part of the design of to memory.
That's kind of scary. Right. Well, I guess my question for Carlo is, yeah, so when that Python process crashes, what happens in the kernel? Does it hang? Does it say, oops, it crashed and return dollar failed?
I'll have to try.
Okay.
I haven't run into this
yet. So, I mean, let's get reasonable protection. And the thing, I mean, arguably, to memory should have a maximum memory. What we have various functions which have maximum memory options, do we not?
But Stephen, I would say let's not try and design this now, because there are very clever things we can do with pagination when we're dealing with like an external, and this is also related to like external object and this whole discussion about lazy evaluation.
Okay, so to memory is a case.
I would like Ricardo to be present when we talk about this.
Okay, all right, hold on. So to memory is something that we have right now for modest sized databases. Correct? That's its use case. if we're paginating and we've got external objects and so on running around, we're not using to memory. To memory is a one gulp way of handling a database, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Or like the result of a query, not the whole database, but
yeah, the database can be enormous, but you have condensed the query down to something gulpable.
Okay, but it's a one gulp solution. So my question is, if I'm going to do this and I don't want everything to blow up, but maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you blow it up and it restarts itself. Kind of like the solution biology uses for, if the organism fails, it dies and its progeny lives on or something.
Can you ask about its size before you do it?
Yeah, but asking for the size might be computationally equivalent to. And also, if you ask for the size and then do the query, the size might change under your feet. It really depends on what database you're dealing with.
Okay, fine. But I'm just trying to ask, could we give it an upper limit somehow or some other indication of, because it's like I might just try this just for fun. And it's like, the good case is if I try it for fun and it's going to fail, it fails quickly, the message isn't too horrible, and everything can restart itself. That will be fine if that's the case. Is that the case or not?
I have to investigate that because I don't know what the interaction is between, say, memory constraint and the external process.
Okay. Well, memory constraint doesn't reach the external process.
Yeah, but maybe we can communicate that somehow. So
yeah, all right, okay, fine. But I just want to say that my best case scenario is whatever it is that you're doing, you just try it. Maybe it blows up. It just tells you, sorry, that's going to take too much memory or whatever. And, it's left in a state where it can be tried again. If that's the case, then I'm a happy person. I don't think pre-wiring, only do it if it takes 10 megabytes of memory or something. I don't think that's as important. I think what's important is most people will just try it. The thing is, it's like, are you afraid to try it? That's really the question. There might be situations in which you're afraid to try it because it might blow everything up.
Yeah, and there's also the situation that you might, like, if things crash and burn, you might leave the database in a state where it's locked. And you have to basically relinquish the connection before. So
yeah, I know. So you need to figure that out. You need to make it so that doesn't happen. Now the other thing is if I say to memory and it just grinds and grinds and grinds, that's also not a good situation. In other words, if it's going to fail, it should fail quickly. Not it just keeps spooling stuff in, and and the fish you're trying to catch is eating more and more and getting bigger and bigger type thing.
Yeah, the problem is that it's very hard to distinguish and say exactly what's happening. I had an example that was using our own GIS server that was looking for, it was looking just for all the streets that had Wolfram in the name. And that was slow, not because there were too many streets like that in the world and it couldn't gobble it up into memory, but just because it was going through a list that was terabyte sized and it took a while. So it wasn't going to fail, but it was going to be slow. And it's hard to distinguish between those cases.
The answer was like 12 places, right?
Yeah, something like that. It's like, it's not.
One of which is Chicago.
Yeah, right. And another one of which is in England, where the road that our building is on got named with it.
Yeah.
So okay. An operation performed both in memory.
It was to show that basically many times things like select and to memory commute. So you can use the same operations and just slap
but how do I know whether it's going to work?
The point is that really, if something doesn't work, is because the function you have is not compilable.
But what does it do when it doesn't work?
Just below failures. So you get eager failures before you actually try to hit the database. You get something saying this will not work because I don't know.
Fails in the metadata.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes you get a message that says, I can't do a Bessel J on the database.
This is going to be this is another one of these crazy, I don't know what works type situations. which is very
But-
frustrating always.
I mean, we have good error messages and most same things work. But
Okay, so you say. Okay.
oh,
All
what
right.
happened here with the typesetting?
Well,
Those were out of core. We're working on making the caching correctly, but you just need to reevaluate them right now, and so then they'll work because those are. In other words, the caching, we're actively working on it, and it will be in 14.2, but it's not there yet. So this, if you take a look at that because of
so
that.
what are we even looking at? Are we looking at this, or are we looking at something else?
Yeah, that's not correct because it didn't cache it correctly. You need to
Reevaluate that. It's fine.
The tab equals to tabular. Reevaluate that, and yep.
So
Okay, there's some nans there.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cast columns. A goes to integer. Levelosaurus. Great. Okay.
Does integer mean machine integer, or does integer mean find the smallest? I guess if we've hovered over.
Machine.
Okay.
In this case, it's machine. Well, that's what we decided the other time when we were talking about having shorthands for these types.
Okay.
I think it's reasonable. What's this? Use all.
Like I'm showing you that you can use other interpreter types because integer, I'm not really using interpreter or integer. I'm using the tabular casting to be extra fast. So basically for all the interpreter types that can be done via a cast, like simple quantity interpreters and integer, real, and so on without restrictions, then I can just use the default cast of tabular column.
Okay.
So it's like I'm cheating.
Yeah, I get it. Well, that's nice that this works. I assume people will know which things they can just say nakedly C arrow integer versus C arrow interpreter of whatever it is. And I wonder whether as a courtesy we should let a string that is an interpreter string just work.
I don't know because the interpreter strings might not be exactly the same thing as types for
I know, but people are
Uh,
going to get this wrong all the time.
Well,
But
then maybe we should sit down. I mean, not in this meeting, and review whether there are collisions of types and interpreter types.
Why don't you answer that question? Should be easy to answer.
Yeah, but I can't do it off the top of my head.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the trick in this case with the semantic interpreter is that I'm actually just sending 3 strings to be interpreted, not 100, because there's only 3 distinct ones.
Right.
But that's calling alpha and all.
Yeah, well, there's also another question associated with this, which we brought up this morning. Is this is allowing? Should we? So interpreter is a function basically, or an operator type that we allow. Should we allow other functions which are naturally conversion functions, like and or bool?
I think we could, as a courtesy. I mean, but in general, it's going to look like transform columns otherwise.
Right. The point for, say, the argument for something like n as a convenience is in cast columns, you can give a list of columns and then the function, and you only have to do the argument, just pound instead of pound.
But I
that
assume, does
particular
this
column.
work if I say, okay, let's do this. And then if I say here,
That probably won't work in your build anyway. So, yeah, I don't know if it's gonna work in your build. No, but wait, Steven, you need #c there anyway. It needs to be a function, and you need to have #c. So because otherwise you're passing it the whole row.
Right.
Okay. Why isn't
That works.
this resizing? Why isn't this resizing? Guys, why isn't this resizing? For the 55th time, Jason.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm working on the copy paste, and that's the next on my to-do list.
What copy paste are you working on?
Oh, being able to copy rows and columns and have them still interpretable.
How do I
Have a block out of the middle of a tabular, copy and paste it. That needs to work.
Now, if you do like a sub block, that won't be possible. You can kind of select an entire row or an entire column, and it will. Yeah.
Okay, what
Okay.
should they have done? That should have made a
that's horrible.
subtabular.
I haven't seen that before, but yeah, if you select like a column out of a multi-column view.
Well, I'm selecting part of a column, so it should presumably make a subtabular with that column. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You should fix this sooner rather than later, this resize thing, because it's going to have weird corner cases, which we won't notice unless, you explicitly do that.
By the way, Rob, why does this have failures rather than missings? Because I changed the behavior of interpreter on a data column to return missings rather than failures. But isn't
yeah, at this point, interpreter gets the normal evaluation mode because the optimized evaluation probably punts, and it gets whatever you do when you do map over the rows.
Oh, I thought you set it up so that it would get the whole data column.
Ideally it would, but that, I think that probably may require a little more wrangling.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it separately.
Okay. Numeric types. Okay. So you're telling me about efficiency here. I mean, this is what I would expect from this, right?
I mean, if the original column is numeric, then it just has to change the metadata and add angstrom to that. It doesn't have to change the underlying data because it's stored as numbers anyway.
I don't understand. Here, if I do this, so I do that, and I say, okay, I didn't know it did that. Okay. And if I had put the angstroms in there explicitly,
you can put meters in that explicitly.
I think you need to use an equal bracket there. Or, oh, maybe that'll work.
He's using interpreter.
Right. Sweet.
Okay, great.
You can try also putting another unit and interpreter will convert it for you.
Oh, I see. If I see, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I was not internalizing the meters were the same. Cool.
No. I had this for 10
Remind me
years.
of something. I've been trying to remember. I'm trying to. What's the size of a typical chemical bond in angstroms?
I think it's close to that's why angstrom are there and we don't use nanometers.
Because you think it's a order of angstrom.
Yeah. It's like hydrogen atom or something like that. But...
Sorry, I just have to have my moment of. That's in picometers. And now
Yeah,
it's
but
okay.
that's about right. An angstrom is 100 picometers.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Places negative numbers. I see.
Yeah, that's restricted 0 to 10. Like,
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah. I think,
All right.
we should strive to make this as efficient as possible, because people like this was something that Ricardo and I originally had not foreseen with Interpreter, that people were going to use it for data science rather than for forms. So I really went through a rewrite to make it more efficient. But if some things can be done in C, then we should.
Okay. All right. What else do we have to discuss here?
I think we're good.
I mean, so I think this question about what really works with a remote database. I mean, who's going to use this for real first? Within the company, are we hooked up some of our transaction databases to this? Have we hooked up our QA databases to this?
Yeah, I mean, the QA database is kind of a weird schema, but we tried it like, what was it, 5 years ago when we first did, and it works. Like, you can query the bugs database with this.
Okay, but let me make a following comment. The fact that people aren't using this a lot every single day is not a good sign.
Yeah, okay, I think this has one big piece of missing functionality. Like, you have no way to get the data in. So suppose somebody gives you like a process that generates a ton of data, or gives you a very large CSV file. How do you save that into a database? There's no way to do that easily within our functionality. You have to go and read the SQLite manual to do that. I think
know that's why we wanted to support. That's why a priority that I've had for like years and years and years is to support file back databases, where you can create them and manage them from within our technology stack. And, you can generalize that and say, oh, let's be able to set up a relational database. No, we're not going to do that. Set up a server-based database. No, we're not going to do that. But a file-backed one, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to create them.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah. But I mean, and still, that would require we sit down, we have some design about that.
Yes, I think we should. I mean, I think it's
I think that
expression. It's like, go ahead.
No, I think that, for example, the fact that we now have a tabular schema brings us somewhat 70% of the way there. Because like, once you have something that is well typed based on our internal compiler types and so on, then you can say, okay, get me a database schema out of this tabular schema so I can try and serialize this whole thing to file.
Yeah, makes sense to me. And then what we need to do is to have something which can go from a CSV that you point to a fileback database without having to convert every byte to in-memory stuff.
Yeah, let's have this discussion after we released. There's actually technology out there that doesn't even need to convert the CVS file at all, and
I understand.
People directly on the CSV file.
I see. Instead of SQLite, you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are streaming versions of this where you don't have to have, you don't really have to put it all into memory, but you can do it. There's all sorts of stuff under the sun.
It's really going to depend on your use case too. Whether you want like an iterator, a stream, or some kind of random access scheme that you create a schema for. How are you getting the data? Yeah.
Okay. Can we put that concept into the global project list, please? Of first of all, creating.
I mean, there is a project for that already. But
okay. All right. Okay.
I mean, we'll make
Steven, can you also look at tabular information and tabular summary?
Now
the reference pages.
Okay, fine. And then we should wrap this meeting up.
Yeah. This gives you structural per column summary.
Why is that called key, not column?
This is just a fake illustration.
Oh, God.
I mean,
God. You know how much I hate these? Because I can't tell. You see what I'm saying?
mm-hmm.
So I just fell into exactly the trap that I've been talking about. Let's not do this, please. You know, these things have got to make it clear that they are, you know, key 1, key 2, key 3 or something, right? Does that make sense?
We decided to change names to keys, right?
So you've got
know, but
column
I'm just
keys,
saying,
right?
don't
So,
put things which I think are content up here if they're not content. See what I'm saying?
Oh, I see what you're saying. The capital.
In the example, you've got to, you know, this is something we've got to hammer in. If you give an example, not in the example section, it must be 100% generic. Right? It must not contain anything where you wonder, is this real or is this just part of the example?
Yeah, Steven, we went through this already. We are iterating with Tim to get better illustrations.
That's wrong, therefore, because I thought that was something real, but it's not.
No, I know,
I
but
think
it's written like fake even on
Hold
top.
on, I don't even understand what you're saying. There is nothing real here. There's symbols. The missing count is M1. There's not an actual number.
I know, but
the type is type 1.
Okay, hold on, Roger.
Yes.
If I run tabular information, do I get a table whose heading is actually missing count? Or is missing count something that's just something you might have there if you felt like it?
No, the idea is to have that as the actual heading.
Okay, fine. Okay, then that's correct. Then what you've done with the example is correct, except these should be italic or something. Okay,
right,
fine.
Right.
Then I was not, in fact, confused. But the word key, that was the thing where...
We changed it from name to key, right?
Okay, well, fine. If it's key, then it's key.
Yeah. But the property is column key. Shouldn't that be column key?
Then it should probably be column key. Fine.
Yes, that's what it should be.
That's fine.
Honestly, that key column thing is like, I wouldn't want to see it there, because being a key column is not a property of a column. Like a single column, it depends if it's a part of a set of column keys. So it's very misleading to have it there as true or false.
I don't know what you're talking about.
This key column.
Yeah.
Key column is a property not of the column itself. Is that?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you mean. Fine. Yeah. We'll delete it. No problem.
Okay. I will point out that it's, you know, all the non-deprecated information functions return sort of you know, sort of an information data-ish thing. They don't return a tabular. So that's a little weird.
Key value.
Yeah, they return sort of key value things.
Yeah. But so this one can do something beyond that. The generic information thing does what the generic information thing does. It's a bunch of key values, right?
Sure. And you know, and Stephen, you had at least previously said that, you know, we should just put everything into information and not have foo information functions anymore. So I submit that for.
Why are we in fact having Why are we having a special tabular information function here?
Because I think you're going to need it as part of the workflow early on, every time.
Okay. And having it be a tabular.
Well, I don't think that that's super, but it's sort of a compromise between both looking good and being able to access data.
Well, and maybe it's like that's the technology you're using. You know tabular. If you're using tabular, you know tabular, so you might as well present it in that form.
May I also point out that in the Rocket Chat channel, Shadi and Stefan, the first thing that a lot of people try is sub-values of properties to see what kind of information they can get about a tabular. It's just really common for users.
And does it work?
I don't think so currently. And there's somewhat of a discussion about tabular information or sub-values as properties. It's just not clear.
Wait a minute, you can't have sub-values as properties because we're using sub-values of tabular to extract elements. That's why we use information.
Good point.
Okay, so look. There's several different things. Should there be a separate tabular information, or should it just be information? There's a certain argument that for this version, it could just be information.
But
And then if we understand, go ahead.
Putting in information something that is naturally two-dimensional is difficult. The advantage of information is that we want this two-dimensional thing that is per column and then properties of each column.
Okay, that's an argument for this. I mean, perhaps we should have information of tabular still work and produce something.
Exactly.
Right.
We plan to.
That's what Roger has further down.
The blue thing there, the tentative thing there is like an initial raw thing.
Okay, fine. I mean, the
It should
side doesn't make sense there, but
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't remember what the other function you wanted, but is this maybe a tabular summary or?
So can you?
Tabular summary, is that correct?
Yes, that's the other one.
What the hell does this do? I see. This is a linguistify type thing for a tabular. Is that correct?
So this describes the content. So it will describe minimum and maximum numbers.
Yeah,
medium.
okay. So it's like this linguistify concept for a tabular. It's the thing that when we feed the tabular to an LLM, we might give it. Is that correct?
There's some superposition with that.
Not superposition. I want to know, is it actually the thing that we would use for that, or is it somehow broken with respect to that?
What do you mean by broken?
Well, I want to know, we have the practical problem. We have tabulars, we got to feed them to LLMs when we're using the notebook assistant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What?
Okay, the reason why I say it's related is because I don't know if there's a need to add some extra specific information for humans and for LLMs that is different in terms of usage.
Well, that's what we should.
So I don't think tabular summary is going to give you out some string that you can feed into an LLM. And when this was brought up originally, I had mentioned that like linguistify is a thing that takes something like a PDF or a file and tries to give you some string that you can communicate to an LLM. And I think that we might need to take that one step further and not just point at files, but maybe linguistify an object or an expression like a tabular.
Yes,
give me something. That's what linguistify should do.
I agree with you, but I'm asking whether this is most of the raw material for that, or is this something off in a different direction?
I don't.
I understand this is not making it.
No, I think this is part of the raw material. The point is like we could take the output of this, make it in like markdown table in a string, and add that to the bundle of things that you give to the LLM when you're talking about Tabular. Maybe you want something. Like maybe you want a bit more. Like we need to iterate and see what triggers the best response. Well, for humans, you probably want a different kind of summary, maybe with more visuals or stuff like that.
Okay, so let me ask this: don't we have a database summary as well? What is database summary?
Well, no, we don't have that.
What do we have that's comparable to that?
I mean, we have a
summary element in import.
Can you scroll down to the first example? That was supposed that illustration went blind. Just evaluate that. That's a fake thing coming out. What?
Well, let me just go to the right. I don't know. Maybe this isn't opening the right thing.
Huh.
Right. So didn't the tabular information have missing count? Isn't that content based? What's the line? First of all, I'm not sure I could remember what's the difference between information and summary, but
okay, they're a bit overlapping, but the thing is that the tabular information you're going to get very quickly, and it's mostly, structural, and it's the things you need to do to basically clean it. The other one is looking at content. It's trying to look at the values and see what kind of properties they have and try to give you a summary of that, which is different. So then you need to compute.
What else do we have a summary for?
And we know the missing count and the non-missing count without looking at the content?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in metadata.
Okay.
Right. So I think tabular information is, Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of a summary of the schema that's visual for humans to consume.
Yeah, what you need as a human when you're going to do cleaning, you're going to know the types. for instance.
Maybe we could
Wait,
work.
I don't think it's just the schema, because the schema doesn't know about missing count or the byte.
No,
Is this maybe tabular properties rather than tabular information? I'm just trying to, like I said, information and summary sound very similar.
Let
so
me
I'm
bring
just
up
trying-
bring up the problem, which I think is challenging, and maybe you guys have an idea. So I tried to put them together. If everything is numerical columns, it's nice. Everything comes out uniform. If you have mixed string, numerics, etc., the way that that table was supposed to type the tabular there would have missing for, the standard deviation of strings is not known type thing.
Yep. Okay, so
what happens when we in the future add more column types? Are we going to add more custom summaries? And how would we present it?
I understand the issue. I mean, one possibility is this function could be something like tabular structure, and it is giving you purely structural information.
Mm-hmm.
Or what we consider structural, which includes missingness and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is,
by the way,
closely related to the schema then at this point. If you
That is
just
correct, but we're not
stuff.
calling it tabular schema because we're not trying to confuse, database schemas with this and so on.
Yeah,
and also the schema really shouldn't know about content, so it doesn't know about length, it doesn't know about how many missings are present, and so on.
True. But I mean, it is related in a sense that you are not looking at. I mean, all this stuff is stuff that you can look up basically from the tabular columns without looking at the data.
Yeah,
again, structural and metadata.
Yeah.
Going back to the non-structural stuff, Stephen, we should really go back to the stuff we did for tabular input in alpha, because right now we could do so much more, like could be so much faster with tabular underneath.
I mean,
and
I also have
not
the
just
feeling.
I'm sorry, what's that? What? Yes, I agree,
Yes.
but what that is apropos of what?
The other one, the tabular summary thing.
Summary,
the tabular summary thing is one of the pods we had for tabular input.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So,
So the
and
other
Alpha will be
decision to
running
make.
14.2 when?
I'm not talking
But-
about in alpha. I'm just saying, like you can have something that is like reportify on a tabular that gives you a bunch of plots and stuff in a notebook.
I think there's a sliding scale. I mean, I explicitly avoided like showing distributions and other things. One can go very far.
Okay, let's
trying
try
to
and
circle
bucket
back
this
to
for a
here.
second.
I think tabular structure. Stephen's suggestion of tabular structure makes a lot of sense to me. I would understand that as different from, or if I didn't know at first, if I saw tabular structure next to tabular summary, I would understand one is telling me structural stuff and the other is telling me about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
So
that makes
I think
sense to me.
first step is let's rename tabular information tabular structure. What it's doing looks quite reasonable to me. I don't know if that seems okay to me. Now, information of tabular, I don't know how similar that should be to tabular structure, but I think information of tabular should work. Does that make sense, people?
Yes, I agree.
But tabular structure is a specialized, well-defined, returns a tabular, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whereas information returns an information object. Right?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay, so now, third item, the possibility of a tabular summary. I mean, I have to say that my suggestion for this version is that we start, building in WFRs and so on, versions of tabular summary, because I think there's quite a bit to do there. I think, as Carlo says, it's very similar to what we did for Wolfram Alpha Pro back 15 years ago. And, I think, Roger, these things it's like the long vaunted visualize function that just takes data and visualizes it. There are lots of things we could do here. I'm not sure that we know what to do.
I think we need to segment off the sort of the report writer to, the thing that you use.
I don't know the dividing line, Roger. That's the point.
Right.
I don't know the dividing line. I mean,
and so
deviation is not terribly useful. If you've got a bunch of, I don't know, things like, dates when bond issues come due. I don't know whether standard deviation makes a hell of a lot of sense there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I think it's very rare, actually. I mean, there's certain kinds of numerical data where standard deviation makes sense, but there are plenty where it absolutely is completely stupid. And I think that I think we've got more experimentation to do here. I don't think we know.
No, I don't disagree. Okay. And part of it is sort of when we grow, I think there's standard utility stuff, and there's sort of this like way more longer report stuff that is trying to do some automated data analysis for you, basically.
Yep.
This isn't it, you know. This was just like
I know. I just don't think I think tabular structure is a fine thing to have. That's a thing that people who want to know roughly what do I have will ask it. I just don't think finding the standard deviation of a column of numbers, I just think that's a shot in the dark.
Can we take a look at the tabular summary
it's a standard
page?
7-number summary. It's like just
does it have if there are any details there?
Sorry, for what? For tabular summary?
Yeah, I want to.
I strongly think we should not try to do this with this version.
I agree with you. I came to the same conclusion. I think it would be useful because it's tedious as hell to have to compute it yourself.
No, I know. This is useful, but let's take whatever we did for tabular summary and let's make a WFR called tabular summary if you want that does this, and let's see what we think about it.
Yeah, that's roughly what I had in mind to do now.
Okay, fine.
And that we do need to explore more. The other thing which I'm worried about, and that's more about reporting, and I wonder if you guys have a good idea, which is that let's say that we add a new column type that's like geoposition.
Yeah.
You would want different kinds of summary.
Sure. I don't know how we make a summary. If the summary has got to be a tabular itself, it's getting funky because we've got columns that say, you know, for a given, if the row key is, you know, whatever that geoposition is, location or something like this, then if the columns standardly include standard deviation, it's going to be pretty stupid. Well, actually, we could probably do that for geoposition, but for plenty of things we can't.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I think that the tabular model for representing these summaries may not be the right model, which is why we have to experiment with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be that there's you know, it's just like if you're doing an ANOVA analysis, for example, much as I hate those things, you know, you've got an ANOVA table. Is an ANOVA table a tabular? I don't think so.
No.
Right. So it's a different kind of object. And, you know, my guess is that most of these data summaries, we may eventually need a data summary object that we can compute with, but we don't yet understand how to compute with those things. For example, if we had a data summary object that, you know, and then you could ask questions of the data summary object, like what's the mean of this data? And the data summary object, without having to go back to all of the data, might be able to just answer that or whatever else. You know, that would seem useful to me. I mean, in other words, I don't know what if the objective is to give a report to the user, then we all know that the reports have to be richer. If the purpose is to have something which is some kind of computable summary, we don't yet know how to do that.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm not entirely sure. We need more experimentation. I completely agree. There is two different avenues where it goes. One is that you want it for a program to be able to read, and either you want it for a human.
Sure.
And there's slightly different optimizations.
I agree.
Then,
and the third case, by the way, is for an AI to read.
Yes.
Which is a different case again.
Different case again. Then there is the size of sort of, you know, how extensive of a report you want.
Sure.
You know,
we prototyped a lot of this stuff with Wolfram Alpha Pro years ago. That's quite nice.
Yeah.
It isn't industrial enough scale. I mean, in other words, we could do the same things, but on, you know, it was intended for it is intended for fairly small lumps of data.
Yeah, but there are a lot of interesting ideas in terms of the semantic typing of the columns. Like, you don't want to treat a numeric column which has like randomly scattered numbers the same way as one that is almost ordered. Like one of them is probably the x-axis rather than the y one, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know we had a lot of good ideas.
Quite a lot of time designing the heuristics for that, so we should
so we should probably reuse that. I mean, look, one thing, Carlo, would be to take the code from there and make WFRs out of that code.
Yeah, okay. So I tried to do some of that, and a lot of it is like kind of tightly knit with alpha infrastructure, and I had started to unwind it because we had to do some kind of a super function analyze that would do that. But then at some point I stopped because I was moved to work on interpreter. So that was like the history of my first couple of years at the company.
Okay, well, fair enough.
So,
But
but work has started on that already. I don't know.
Okay, good. Well, I mean,
how
maybe an
compatible it
LLM
is
could
with
help
what we
a
have
bit
now.
with
Yeah.
the untangling of code. It does okay at that. All right, let's wrap it up here.
Okay.
Okay. Is there going to be more meetings?
Well, I think
for
that this is it,
14.2?
Stephen. There might be something, but I think, as far as I know, this is it, unless something comes up.
Okay. Yeehaw. Okay.
Yes.
Until 14.3.
Yep.
Tabular is good to go. All right.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot, guys. See you later.